being in Sweden, and I just made my first Swedish friends like 6 months in, get invited to like kind of a house party, but just a couple guys getting together. We're sitting over having a couple beers, and everybody's playing this slot machine. Like they all put money in, and they're playing this game to try to win money. And we sat there for like 2 hours as they played the game. And I remember, I really like my friends, but I remember thinking like it was a little bit boring and just kind of not being as into it, and could really see that a lot of young people my age in Sweden that were men were like really into kind of gambling. And I didn't think much of it. And then when I would go to like a bar for the first time, you would see some bars had places where you could play cards, and they had slot machines there that you could play. And I thought that was interesting as well. And then if you go to like a grocery store or like a Presbyterian, there's always people betting on horses and other type of gambling you can do there. Of course, they have lottery tickets as well. And you know, I've always found it interesting that Sweden, being a country that's so conservative when it comes to alcohol and a lot of drug laws and things, how easily accessible gambling is in Sweden. If you think about it, you can't even watch like a sporting event or go to like a hockey game without seeing some type of gambling advertisement or having something sponsored by like an online gambling company. In Sweden, you have to be 18 to gamble, and you have to be 20 to go to a casino. So that is something that I also find to be interesting. And I'm not suggesting that people are necessarily addicted to it, because you can make an argument because it's so readily available and so easy for anyone to do it, maybe less people are going to gamble, but then that kind of messes up things if you bring up the system blog or talk about other things that Sweden has. So it is interesting. I also saw a statistic that said that most people that are actually addicted to gambling tend to be females in Sweden, which I found to be a very interesting statistic. The cynical part of me, which I'm an American and I'm cynical when it comes to government, I sometimes wonder, like, is the reason gambling is so readily available is because Sweden gets a lot of tax money from the gambling. Is that maybe why you see it on every corner? Is that why it's readily available? I don't know. And to be fair, I mean, in America's system, we have prescription drug commercials on television, and come on, that's completely and totally messed up. But, you know, Sweden just passed a law in June where they banned CBD that had any forms of THC in it at all. And yet you can gamble if you want to. And, you know, one is going to potentially ruin your life and one isn't. And I just find it funny that that's the way society is here. But, you know, Sweden is so, like, liberal about things but conservative about things at the same time. Like, you know, Sweden's liberal when they've had things like legalized gay marriage and like trans rights, and very socially Sweden's liberal, but has always had a harder stance on a lot of other things except gambling. So, you know, I find it totally to be interesting, because you go to other parts of Europe and it's like kind of the opposite. You know, people are a lot less conservative when it comes to drugs and stuff, but maybe not as socially progressive as Sweden. So people always say to me, like, is Sweden liberal? Yeah, it's a liberal place full of very conservative people, I feel like. I always see Swedes that way. They're very liberal, but conservative about things. And if you talk to Swedes, and I can see their point, they don't want their country to end up like other countries where you see a lot of people on the streets that are alcoholics or things like that, because there are other countries you can go to see that. I think it's great that Sweden wants to have some of these things, but like I said, the cynical part of me has to think that, you know, gambling is involved. But I would think if you were addicted to gambling, it might be hard in your life to move around Swedish society and not be affected by this. And another thing I would think of as well is, like, being a kid, you just might be around gambling all the time. I mean, you're going to see a gambling commercial on television. You're going to see it when you're trying to watch sports. I mean, every young person pretty much in Sweden is into football in some shape or form, or watching it or following the World Cup. And you can't get by without seeing a gambling commercial. Now, this video is just, you know, intended for educational purposes, but also just to be fun. I'm just giving my opinion. You know, I'm happy with my quality of life in Sweden. I think my quality of life is probably higher here than in the United States, and I think it's great that Sweden takes care of things. I never did a video on this before, but I just always found it to be a little bit hypocritical how Sweden was so conservative about some things, but very, very open-minded about it when it came to gambling and thinking about the tax revenue that comes with that. So that's my opinion on it, and I'm kind of curious what your opinion is, and please educate me on this if I'm totally wrong, because, you know, that happens sometimes, and, you know, I get nervous trying to be somewhat negative with things, but I've done it in the States and I've done it here, and I need to be true to you guys and just be myself and just say what I see, because it doesn't mean that I'm right. It's just an observation that I've made. And so I love the discussion we have. I hope you can keep it civil overall and just realize that, I love the country that I live in. I love Sweden. So, jag ska Sverige. So I will see you guys in the next video. Hej då!